I don't know anybody who doesn't have some sort of complex thoughts around body image, around weight. Sometimes there's issues with food. I personally have a long journey that goes along with eating disorders. And this episode is really around self-love. It's knowing that we all have journeys that we've gone through, patterns and stories that we're telling ourselves, experiences that we had in our lives that created beliefs. And now in our soul recovery, we're learning how to love ourselves deeply, to be able to move out of dysfunctional ways of eating, dysfunctional ways of seeing ourselves, regardless of what's happened in your life before, so that you choose to live a life that is healthy for you and to love yourself. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast, a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. My name is Reverend Rachel Harrison. I started Recover Your Soul after having profound changes in my life from my recovery of alcoholism, codependency, and control addiction. I was guided to share the tools and principles of spirituality and soul recovery to help others transform their lives as mine was transformed. For us to overcome external circumstances, we need to turn the attention to ourselves, focusing on our inner change and healing. Positive results in our lives will follow. Welcome to Recover Your Soul. It's Rev Rachel, and I'm thankful for our time together today. Maybe you're new to the soul recovery community. Maybe you just found a podcast because you were searching for something, and now you're here. And what I love about that is I believe that is by no mistake that we find what we need when we're asking for it. You know, there's so many spiritual teachings and religions that say, ask and you shall receive. It's one of the parts of my prayer that I usually say, ask and you shall receive. And my hope is that this gives you some guidance, that it helps you to remember that you are indeed whole, that what you need is within you. And when you do ask, you receive. And that these words, this story that we're on together, this journey that we're all on together around healing from codependence, healing from somebody else's dysfunction, healing from somebody else's pain. Maybe we're really looking at our own dysfunction, our own addiction, that it gets us into the door where we discover our innate, whole, true selves, that we learn how to step into our authentic way of being, that we learn to be okay when the people around us aren't okay. And this journey of being a human being is complicated. And this is a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. And, you know, it's interesting. I have it say happy and healthy. And what I really should have said was joyous and free, because ultimately joy is something that's within us. Happiness kind of comes from the outside. It wants to be filled up. And freedom means that you're released of that need for anything else to be okay, for you to be okay. But I'll take a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life because that's part of it too. Today's episode, I wanted to talk about health. I wanted to talk about self-love. And I looked back, it has been since 2021 that I did an episode on body image and self-love and loving ourselves. And most of the listeners, I know that we do have some men on here, but most of our listeners are women. And, you know, we're so hard on ourselves. We're so critical to ourselves. And as we're coming into the holidays, and I stepped on the scale this morning and went, ooh, wow, too much cake and sugar, but I'm certainly not going to do anything about that right now. I really just wanted to share this journey that we have as women around how we change, how our bodies change, how we see ourselves, how we need the world to see us for us to be okay. Because ultimately in soul recovery, what I want us to feel is empowered in our own experience, to love ourselves deeply and fully, exactly as we are. And then changes that we may choose to make don't come from an unhealthy, codependent, needy place. They come from a place where we're doing it for ourselves. We're doing it because it's the right thing for us to do. So that's what we're going to talk about today. When I was growing up, I had food insecurity. And it wasn't in a situation where my parents didn't think that we had food insecurity. If you were to ask either one of them, they would probably say that we were fine. But my memory is that there wasn't a lot. It wasn't that we didn't have any. And I know that there are a lot of people who might be listening who had much more difficult upbringings than I did. We were just poor hippies. We were just poor hippies. And if my mom had cheese and tortillas in the refrigerator, then everything was good. I didn't grow up with a family that cooked or ate together. We ate somehow, and funny, I've done the exact same thing in my own life with my family. And my mom had a couple recipes that she would make on a regular basis, but really it was more grazing, or I'm not entirely sure what it was, but there wasn't this feeling like there was enoughness. And so from a very young age, I think that I became aware of sort of the value of food, maybe the complexity of food. I would go visit my dad on my times and my weekends with my dad. And one of the things I really remember is that we had a lot of cream of mushroom soup, and I still love cream of mushroom soup to this day. But it was, don't ask for too much. Here's what's available. This is what you get. I never was starving, but, it was like, this is what you get, and this is all we have. And it was that way for food. It was that way for clothes. It was, we always had exactly what we needed, but there wasn't a lot extra. When I was 13, my dad met his second wife, and I had been so used to him just dating a lot of different people that I never thought that this relationship would last, because most of his relationships were pretty fleeting. But she had a son who was about my same age. I think we're off by maybe a month or two. And so here we were, these two kids around the same age, these two parents. And what I remember about the beginnings of that relationship that was really complex was that, again, I would get inserted into somebody else's house. This is how it was when I would go to visit him as well, that he would be with a girlfriend and I would sort of be hanging out in somebody else's house. And that was awkward and hard for me. Now, in soul recovery, what we're really looking at is we're looking not at judgment. There's no judgment in soul recovery. We're doing as much as we can of looking at what was the experience for you. What did you believe and see for yourself? So when I tell these stories, it is very likely that if the same story was told by my dad or my stepmom or my stepbrother, that they would have entirely different stories. And of course they do. Their memories would be entirely different. Of course they would. So when we go back and touch in on these experiences for ourselves, what I want you to give yourself permission for is we're not labeling anyone or anything as good or bad. What we're looking at is we're looking at how our younger psyche saw it. What is the story that was created about what was happening and how you were supposed to show up that then set up systems of how you showed up in the world after that? So for me, when it came around food, I recognized that I didn't feel like there was enough. And yet at the same time, I was very conscientious about having to ask for, and that felt very out of control for me. I didn't recognize that at the time. There's definitely hindsight is 2020 when you're digging into and processing all of this psychology and emotional belief systems and wounds. And part of this is really being able to allow it to unfold and share with you. So, of course, at those times, I didn't have any awareness around any of this. I was just being a little kid trying to figure out how to be okay. One of the things that I liked about my dad's new girlfriend was that there was stability. One of the things that I didn't like was I was put in another person's home with their stuff. So early on in their relationship, in like the first 6 months or a year or something, we ended up doing a long car trip with me and my dad's girlfriend's son, who's my age, in a station wagon. And we went from New Mexico to Texas to go visit my dad's mom. And then we went from Texas all the way to the East Coast, where my dad's soon-to-be second wife was from. One of the things that I remember happening on that trip was really feeling overwhelmed. Like I have this really strong memory of feeling really overwhelmed, and that I could start to feel this truth that my dad was in this relationship. And so that was changing our dynamics. And that was already pretty complicated. If you really think about the complexities of our moms and our dads and what we're trying to get and who we think we are. And there's just a lot of stuff around that. So we finally get to the East Coast and we're walking around in some small town. And I know that we don't have any money. I know that it's very tight. It has been very tight my whole life. And I have learned from a long time to not ask for or assume that we're going to go out to eat or that we're going to do things. This is how I was raised. But I remember at this particular situation that I was hungry. And so I asked my dad for $1, whatever it was at the time, to go get a hot dog from a vendor down the street. But we were at a restaurant and we were with some of my soon-to-be stepmom's friends. And so they, of course, said, oh, let's just get something here, and that didn't go well because we didn't have the money to really be able to do like a meal out with a whole bunch of people. But it was embarrassing, I assume, for the grown-ups that was a hardship. And it ended up causing this huge kerfluffle in the evening. And I really can't even remember the things except for that something was mentioned in this fight eventually with my dad and his soon-to-be his wife, my stepmom, where she said, all I did when I came to their house was to eat. And something happened in that moment within me. And what I recognize around control that's fascinating is we will find control wherever we can get it. And I decided that I would never eat their food again. And I flew home from that trip. And every time I went and visited, I didn't eat. Well, what that ended up starting to do was then I would lose weight. I started being obsessed with this concept around controlling what I was eating as the only way that I could control anything in my life. I felt very overwhelmed it felt like every aspect of my life. I didn't do well in school. School was hard for me. I was being raised by a single mom who was working and doing everything she could to take care of me. I had a lot of alone time. I wasn't really in friends groups. I had a kind of strange upbringing, to be honest. And somehow in it, this piece where I was controlling my food became my first real addiction. And then I got recognized by people for being thinner. And I had never really gotten that kind of attention before. So to get that attention gave me something to strive for. And for 2 to 3 years, I would say, probably from the time I was 13 to 16, I really restricted my food and would consider myself to be anorexic. And I became obsessed with the lowering of the scale, that I would get on the scale and it'd get less and less and less. And I think I have told this story before because I'm remembering the 111 pounds. Oh, I mentioned this in one of my interviews recently on the Bonus podcast with a woman who specializes in eating disorders. That was such a great conversation. Anyway, I finally got to this place where I got on a scale and I weighed 111 pounds and it scared me. And I think that something inside of me, we have these pieces within inside of us that know better, that know better. Nobody was noticing at my dad's house that I didn't eat. Nobody. It was like I was punishing myself and I was doing all this control. And for all of those years, they never once said to me, oh, I noticed, Rachel, that you're incredibly thin now or you don't eat. No, they were just involved in their own lives, doing their own thing. It was always crunchy and strange there. And so when I look at how that moment hit me where I looked at the scale and it was this number that I knew was not well, that this wasn't good for me. And right after that, I ended up having my wisdom teeth taken out and had a horrendous situation with dry sockets. And then I literally couldn't eat. And I remember just getting over these dry sockets and watching television and having all these food commercials, and something in me switched. It's kind of like the switch when I quit drinking, a switch switches, and somehow with food, a switch switched, and I just said, this isn't healthy for me. Are you ready to step into your soul recovery? Well, I am here to support you as your spiritual coach. Visit the website to book one-on-one coaching sessions with me as we transform your life through working the 9 steps of soul recovery. You can also choose to work the steps on your own through the modules at your own pace. I'm excited to also be announcing that there are retreats every year, both in Colorado and other places in the country, workshops and events, and I hope that you also will join us the first Monday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for the free Zoom support group. This is an amazing place for us to connect, learn, and share our stories. And don't forget to join the private Facebook group for soul recovery, inspiration, connection, answering each other's questions, and giving shout outs. I thank you for supporting this podcast either by being a Patreon member, Apple Podcast subscriber, and getting that extra episode every Friday, or by your one-time donations or your small monthly donations that are found in the show notes. You are helping spread the soul recovery message and supporting this community. Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net for dates, times, everything that's happening, register for the support group, and how to stay connected. Together, we can do the work that will recover your soul. But this part of how I responded to my body always was in there on some level. And so when I decided that I was going to stop punishing myself, because I was trying to punish my dad, but really I was punishing myself, or I was trying to punish this family system that was uncomfortable for me. And I started eating a little bit more, and got healthier, so that by the time I met my husband, I was still a pretty thin human being. I was probably, when I met Rich, I was probably 130 pounds, right? And I'm about 5'7". And he was from LA, and he really liked this concept of me being sexy and thin and beautiful. And, he had been raised in that kind of environment. I was watching the videos recently that we took of us on the beach when I was 22 years old. And, I was gorgeous. I'm so lucky to have had this lanky, thin body. But even then, I remember being obsessed with wanting to look a different way. I wasn't restricting to the level that I did before. I had healed myself from that end, but I still could feel this part of me that was afraid that if I didn't keep my body a certain way, that I wouldn't be loved or I wouldn't be accepted. I'm going to go totally vulnerable in this story, and can feel the emotion. And again, what I want to say is that it's imperative when we tell these stories that you feel your experience and you don't judge anybody else. And you also recognize that your vision of what it felt like and what happened to you is uniquely your own. And the same for everybody else in the story. Rich's mom had come from a very similar upbringing. She had been a flight attendant in the olden days where you had to weigh a certain amount to be able to be a flight attendant. And there was this desire to be perfect. And the entire time that I had her in my life before she passed away about 15 years ago, she was consumed with her weight. And it was really important to her. And she basically grazed and didn't ever really eat, but she loved to cook and she loved to have people around. But she told me early in my relationship with Rich that if I ever got above a size 10, that he wouldn't be attracted to me. He wouldn't love me. And something in that didn't feel right to me. And what I think is interesting when you look back on the things and the experiences that you've had in your life that really were markers in time, all we can say is that we responded to them with whatever we had in that moment. And in that moment, things were already complex in my relationship with my husband. And I already had had a child, and I had already started gaining weight. And one of the things that I loved about Rich was that even though he loved this thin part of me, he also loved somebody who would play with him, who would eat with him, who would drink with him, who would, experience life with him. And because of that, your body goes to whatever is comfortable for your body. Starting from when I had Alex, my breasts got huge and my body got bigger. And ever since then, I have been a bigger gal. I've been a size 12, 16, basically my entire adult life. And yet at the same time, I've been on this lifelong journey of self-love and self-acceptance. And it's interesting to go back and look at the last 25 years in particular since I had Bodhi, and look at the seesaw, yo-yo diets, the ways that I've treated myself, the conversations that I've had within myself about who I am and how I relate to the world and how people see me and what my body looks like. And it's always been about everybody else instead of about how I feel in my own skin. And so as I've come into these last almost 7 years of soul recovery, I've been really working with and having more honesty with myself around what it means to be me, what it means to love myself, what it means to accept myself for exactly who I am, and to get out of the cycle where what other people think of me, especially my husband, especially my friends, especially society, deems to be appropriate and beautiful, and what I like, what feels good to me, how I can love myself. I mean, at this point, I'm about to turn 55 years old. And the other day I was thinking about how even if I somehow decided that exercise was fun for me, I know that people love exercise, good for you. I've never really been an exercise person. I have always been a contemplator, a person who I like to go to the gym, because you go to the gym, you can leave the gym at any time. You don't have to stay. You don't have to be stuck on a trail somewhere. It's this funny thing that I have that I've been working with myself. Like, what is that about? Why are you afraid to do that? I've been contemplating all these aspects of myself. But I think the most interesting thing is that our self-sabotage, our inner critic, can be so vicious that I teeter-totter with myself back and forth between the part of me that I love me now. I love me in a way that I never could have imagined me feeling in my own skin from the time that I was a child, that it's been so complex. But I also have all my neuroses that I've ever had and all my strange things that I've ever had. They're just better, they're not running my life so much. And having been with food insecurity, I'm one of those people that I have to have a stocked pantry. I have to have a refrigerator that's filled with stuff. Even if I never eat it, I want choices. And I don't cook big dinners because I wasn't raised that way. And when my life was so chaotic and crazy and weird with everybody fighting in the family, the last thing I wanted was for us to sit at a table and to hear my husband complain to my kids and have my kids fight with each other. So we didn't do dinner. Somehow everybody ate, but if there was ever dinner, if I ever made dinner, I would pop them in front of the TV where everybody would be quiet, and I would do something for myself. I would totally run away. So there's all this complexity, right, around all these things. And what I think is so beautiful is that when you really check in with yourself and you take judgment off for you, not just making sure that everybody around, everybody has their preferences. Does Rich prefer that I am healthy and fitter? Yes, he does. But, if I listen to what he's actually saying to me, He is saying those things to me because he wants to have a long life with me. He wants us to be in good health so that we can go do the things that we want to do. He wants us to feel good. And he tells me over and over and over that I'm beautiful to him, that I'm attractive to him, which I'm so grateful for. But in my mind, I hear my mother-in-law's voice saying, if you're over a size 10, you won't be attractive. Well, I haven't been a size 10 since before I had kids. So what does that mean? If you allow other people's projections to taint and determine who you are, you won't find the love and the acceptance of yourself that is who you are. There are many bodies, many ways of being, many faces, many levels of beauty. There is many ways of being. And there isn't anything that is right or wrong. It's really around us beginning to unlayer those harmful, painful experiences that we've been through and release and let them go. Do I need to go back and really dig into the food insecurity and the out of controlness and the trauma of separated parents and, second marriages and the complexity of all those things? Maybe, I have on the level that is right for me, but they certainly are not in there forcing me to believe that that makes me broken. You've heard this from me. No one is broken. No one is broken. We are all whole. It's actually about remembering our wholeness. So whatever this journey that I've been on around what my body looks like or how much it weighs, the funny thing is that the more that I've done soul recovery, the more that I've done this work of consciously looking at myself in the mirror, I can look at myself and in an instant I can say, aren't I lucky? Aren't I lucky? I'm 54 years old and I feel good. Am I totally fit? Absolutely not. Is there more that I could do? Absolutely. But I love me. And then in an instant, your critic can come up and say, oh yeah, well, look at this and look at that and look at this. But now I don't fall into that. And it's interesting, the tears and the emotions that came up in this are really those parts of me that want to be released and to be let go. And what's really interesting is that there's some part of me that had held onto the weight as a protection when Rich and I were really struggling, that if it meant that he wouldn't love me or be attracted to me, and it was painful in my relationship, in a way, it kept him out in my mind, whether that was true or not. In my mind, it was a way to say, I'm gonna make it so that you're not as attracted to me so that I can hide. When I started my sobriety journey, it's coming up on 7 years. So I'm thinking about how right now, as we come into Christmas, was getting ready to go on my trip to Thailand with my mom and, all the preparations and everything that happened. I was probably at one of my heaviest. I look back at those pictures and I don't even recognize myself. And it was because I was bloated with alcohol. I was bloated with a really unhealthy blood system. I had been going to the doctor and they were really concerned with my blood work. I was bloated and really unhealthy. And then after I got sober, I lost 20 pounds almost immediately from just not having the alcohol and the sugar in your body. And when I got back from Thailand, I was actually in a musical and it was with dancing and moving around. And, I got a whole bunch of exercise doing that. And then I've bebopped around all this time. I did no sugar almost a year ago. We did no sugar for a while. Again, easy to drop 10 pounds when you don't do sugar. I felt so much better. My addiction crept back in and sugar has sort of crept back into my life. But what I recognize now, and this is the piece I want to stand in empowerment, is when I'm journaling, when I'm speaking to myself from my higher self, it never says you should look a certain way for someone else to love you or for you to love yourself. that you need to fit into a certain size pair of pants, or that you need to have a certain look. I mean, if you've ever seen me, I don't dye my hair. I love makeup. I've always loved makeup, but I'm trying even to wear less because now I'm in my 50s and it gets a little, you don't want to look too crazy, because I've loved being a girl. I love dressing up. I love that aspect of me. But I do that because I like it, because I feel good about myself. And what happens in the journaling is saying, love yourself enough that you want to be healthy, that you have so many things to enjoy and do in your life, that all of that pained stuff in the back, it's over. It's gone. It's done. Am I going to be running through my head all these different scenarios of having been anorexic or having, eating disorders or moving in the other direction to binging? Am I going to let that taint what's happening in my life and the wholeness and the happiness that I have now? No, I want to eat cleaner, not because I want to look a certain way. I want to eat cleaner because I want to treat my body well. And what's interesting is that if I look at pictures of myself, I actually think in these years of sobriety, I look different than I did before. I look different and I feel different. My body is probably about the same, but in my being, I hold myself differently because I feel more and more comfortable in my skin of who I am. I love myself more deeply. I want to embody and embrace this healthy part of me that wants to enjoy my life. And that is very different than everything filtering through these complex memories and these old belief systems and these patterns around what food is. And now I do more of what tastes good? What does my body really want right now? And sometimes my body really wants things that aren't good for it. But when I'm having those kinds of cravings, I actually check in with myself and I say, what's that about? What does it want? Is that really about that French fries would taste delicious if you're having a burger? But if you're sitting at home and you're craving French fries, there's something within me. Generally, if that's happening, there's something else going on that reminds me of how wine used to feed my addiction. And just allowing those feelings to come in and to touch them and to release them and let them go. We're heading into the holidays, and so I don't want to be in the holidays saying, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to have your cookies that you made at the party. But I am going to be mindful of those parts of me that are all showing up, the one that's unhealthy and afraid and scared and sometimes still has its unhealthy behaviors that wants to have the 10 cookies, right? And the part of me that says, I want to feel good. I want to feel good in my body. And for each of us, that has an equilibrium. And I want to love myself. And I want to be healthy for my kids and for my grandkids. I want to be healthy for myself. I want to have a relationship with myself that allows me to be more comfortable in having an intimate relationship with my husband as well. And I want to love myself first and foremost. And when I love and accept and see myself for the beauty of who I am, and first and foremost here, then I can trust that when I receive that feedback from the people around me, that it's genuine and it's from that place of wholeness instead of trying to please everyone around me or come in an unhealthy manner. So, who knows what's going to happen when I open my mouth and start talking. I didn't expect it to go in that direction. Food is indeed a couple things. One, and first and foremost, it is such a touchy subject for many of us, especially women, because for many of us, it was the only thing that could be soothing or bring us comfort. And most of us have something with food. And it's around giving yourself grace and compassion and using the soul recovery process, the concepts around soul recovery about releasing judgment and beginning to allow yourself to feel your feelings and be curious about what's going on in there. And the other is that food is actually medicine, that everything that we ingest, will make us feel a certain way. And if we begin to believe that we are deserving of a life that is whole and uplifted and healthy and beautiful and joyous, we will make different choices. That's why I will never drink. I will never drink again because I deserve more than what it does to me. And so when I think of food on that same level, sugar and food, and I say, I deserve to be joyous and happy and enjoy what I put in my mouth, but I am not going to harm myself because I love myself too much. It's a lot easier to make healthier choices. And I do believe that when I come back from my 3 weeks in California over the Christmas break and being with the kids, my hope is that we'll have walked and been outside. And I want to incorporate that into my life, not because I want to look a certain way, but because I want to be able to really be in my life. And I need to find a way to bring that joy in. I'm thinking dancing, maybe. Dancing and yoga sounds really fun. So look at what's in your own life around body image. I encourage you to look at yourself in the mirror and love yourself for exactly who you are. Man, everything is photoshopped. Everything is filtered. It's been like that forever. There is no ideal. I love that they're bringing more full-figured women into advertising. Really allow yourself to be happy with who you are. And if you make choices around changing your eating or your exercise, it should not be to benefit anybody else's desire of who you think they think you should be, right? It should be because you love yourself. You love yourself. And you want to be your best you. Until next time, namaste. Thank you for listening, and I hope that helps support your soul recovery process. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that every Friday is the Recover Your Soul bonus podcast, and this is available both to Apple Podcast subscribers for $3.99 a month, or it's available for both free and paid Patreon members. So as a Patreon member, you can choose. Do you want to support the podcast with $5, $10, or $25 a month? Totally volunteer, but to let you know that if you want to listen to those bonus episodes, incredible interviews, wonderful book studies, you don't have to be a paid member. You can access them in the first week or two that they're available free on Patreon. This community is so important to me, and I want you to know I treat it with love and consideration. If you want coaching, I'm here for you. You want to come to a retreat, I'm here for you. You want to come to the free Soul Recovery Support Group, the community is here for you. Watch us on Facebook, Instagram, follow us on all the social media for daily inspiration. Be part of the Facebook group. And one of the most important things is that you share this podcast with people that you think that it will resonate with, that you think that they're interested. Give it 5 stars, give it a review. We are growing this community together because together we can do the work that will recover your soul. The Recover Your Soul podcast and its content is for educational purposes only and is not allied or representative of any organizations or religions. It's based on the opinions and experience of Reverend Rachel Harrison. Recover Your Soul claims no responsibility to any persons or entity for any liability, loss, damage, or cause alleged to be caused directly or indirectly as a result of its use. Applications or interpretations of the information represented herein. Take what you need and leave the rest.